All right, does that do it?
Hello and welcome to DaleSchaferLaw Chats, a candid conversation with industry professionals on complex legal and business issues in the cannabis industry. I am Heather Schaefer, legal assistant with the law offices of Dale Schafer and CEO of Agorasi Business Services. And you all know attorney Dale Schafer, 2-decade California cannabis attorney with the current focus on cannabis business law. Today we are chatting with Arman from EcoWaste Services. Arman, tell us a little bit about you, what brought you into the cannabis industry, and a little bit about your business.
Sure. Hey everybody, my name is Arman Zeytounyan. I am the CEO and co-founder of EcoWaste Services. A little bit about what we do is we're a cannabis waste management company, and it's an odd thing to hear, but we handle all kinds of compliance and waste management for the industry and the entire supply chain. So I'm sure we'll get into that, but a little bit about how we got into the business. We're in medical waste since 2011, me and my partner, and he founded the company in 11, and I joined him in 2016. And in 2018, we started getting some phone calls, some interest about cannabis waste. And like a lot of people, it was first to us too, to hearing about that, and we decided to look into it a little bit. So we did some digging. We saw that there were some regulations that were coming out about it. We started talking to some friends we had in the industry, asking them if they've heard anything about it, and they kind of gave us some positive feedback that this is something that they might find value in. And we decided to just get right into it, and that's how we got started. And now we're servicing all of Southern California and working our way up to Northern California and other states.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in now, Arman. When they started in 2018, they had requirements that you could get a commercial entity to come pick your waste up, or if you're going to take it yourself, it had to go to these 4 specific entities. Now, those have been revised since then, where I think it's a little bit easier to bring an approved local entity in to do your waste. Are you seeing any problems getting approval in different jurisdictions where cannabis businesses actually make waste to come in and get their stamp of approval to come in and do this?
Yeah, so we're not seeing any challenges. So currently we don't have a license with BC because they don't license out anything to haulers. We have to go to the local municipalities to get our traditional transportation business certificates. Nothing extra, but they still have to go through the red tape any other business would. We haven't had any challenges with any cities really. They've been mostly acceptive of it. You know, they haven't really inquired any specific detail as far as like what is cannabis waste or whatnot. They just give us our license for that city, and we continue on servicing that the clients we have in that area.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the 2 problem areas I ran into. One of them was from a cultivation site, the stems, the stalks, what otherwise would just be hemp, and what's going on with that. And then post-extraction biomass. That's another area where we just saw so much infighting in these bureaucracies. So can you start with the cultivation waste? What are you doing, and what happens downstream from you when you actually collect it?
Right, so what we do is when we collect the waste, it depends. So a cultivator will generally generate, like you said, stalk, stem, leaves, but they'll also generate rockwool cubes and the perlite or growing, any kind of other growing medium, whether it's soil or any other kind of base material like that. So we collect all of that, and we start to segment the waste from there. Anything that's compostable will go to a composting facility to get composted. But what we do is we save a few samples from each of those subcategories, and we send them out to other manufacturers or other producers of any kind of sustainable product we find interesting or curious. And right now we're doing a lot of testing on that and seeing where do we want to kind of put our focus on, and where do we want to send those sub materials to kind of bring it back into the supply chain. So there's a lot of applications, but the trouble is a lot of these manufacturers, they don't want to take on these waste streams because it's not enough volume for it to justify the cost in actually producing a renewable product out of it. So that's the challenge we face so far on the cultivation side. But right now, anything that's compostable gets composted. Anything that's not composted will still end up going to a landfill.
And do you have manufacturing facilities where you're getting post-extraction biomass and maybe post-winterization liquid? And I think it's typically ethanol. What are you doing with those kinds of waste products?
So it's two parts. Typically, extractors, what they'll have is they'll have cannabis waste and they also have hazardous waste. We don't go with the hazardous waste. We have partners that we work with that we offload the hazardous waste to. But the post-extract biomass, if it's under 0.1% in flammable content, it can be considered a cannabis waste material, a biomass. So what happens is, let's say an extractor extracts biomass and it just, a bunch of it just sitting there. If they let it air out for about 48 to 72 hours, a lot of that the fumes on that biomass will evaporate, and that material will become a cannabis waste substance. It won't have anything flammable on it anymore, and it can be then composted or put into an area where it can be recycled in some way. But anything that passes that limit, or anything that is heavy in flammable or toxic content, we end up classifying as hazardous, and we send it off to our partner companies.
So if a manufacturer has a place where they put the bulk biomass, is this something that is on the premise permit and license from the state? Is it some place where they just put it into a waste room and let it off gas? How does that work?
Yeah, so they'd have to keep it on site, and they'd have to put it in their designated waste area. According to the regulations, every licensee is going to have a designated waste area. Now, specifically, each license will probably do it in different ways, and whichever inspector comes out there, they'll have their own opinion on what's in accordance with the regs and what's not. Typically, what our clients do is when we provide the containers, they'll leave it in the containers in their designated waste area and let it off gas off there, and then we'll come and pick it up.
So they have some sort of a scientific device to tell them if their VOCs are at some level, then you'll come pick it up. Otherwise, it's going to be a higher handling charge to go pick up the stuff that's now still got off-gassing VOCs?
Yeah, it's not that it's a higher charge from us, but it would be a different classification of the waste. So if it gets classified as hazardous, that's one of the most expensive waste streams to dispose of. You're looking at 3x or 4x the price that it would be to be disposed of as a cannabis waste substance. They have to do the testing, and they have to verify the material on their end, because it's the generator's responsibility to ensure that they're classifying correctly. We act as just a hauler and a managed provider, but we can't come in and perform that kind of a service for the licensee, because it'll come in conflict with their set of compliance rates. They have to follow. We try and do it as much hands-free as we can, because we want to make sure that the licensee is on top of their own material. If they want to classify it as hazardous to be extra safe, it's their right to do so. So we don't want to come in and say you have to do it one way or the other.
Now, the post handling, or a secondary market for the compostables right now, which you're throwing in, downstream from you, I know that it's not volume enough to be practical right now, but what kinds of markets are you looking to for stems and stalks? What might just be basically low grade hemp ground up that you might make something out of? What kind of markets are you looking at where that might go?
Yeah, so the stem, stalk, or the herds, anything that has the fibrous material can be treated just like hemp, or it could be recycled just like a hemp product would. It could be hempcrete, it could be clothing product, it could be packaging. Even if it's a full-blown stem, it might even be able to have high sugar content, what might be extracted and made into ethanol even. So there's different applications to it, and we're looking at all of those applications, and we're talking to companies in all of those fields, I would say. The leaves and the soil, we're actually trying to do something internal with it, and we're trying to create I don't want to call it a fertilizer, but more like a more efficient or effective way to render the cannabis waste, because which is a completely different component of these regulations, but licensees have to render their waste prior to it being collected. And that's a big area that we want to kind of tap into as a provider, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to create a product that can help these licenses do that. So we're taking the leaves in the soil and doing some testing and mixing it up and trying to figure out a way to have that used in that field.
I remember when the regulations first rolled out, we're trying to figure out what in the world could be done with this stuff, and there was all sorts of weighing requirements and you have to grind it up with a certain percentage of some inert so that it's not recognizable and usable. And for attorneys, when they throw a new word in there, you think, shh, come on, man,
Yeah.
you're killing us. What do we got? What does this mean? And now from a practical standpoint, and this was an idea I had, that you could get dirt, recycle dirt out and go to a facility that's got to destroy, or they're going to, destruction is one of those areas that you have to handle. Or you're going to take something that might have some inherent value, like a nursery that takes seeds out of flowers, but then what's left over now is waste, even though that's what they used to make medicines out of. So in that arena right there, how do you see that rolling out in the next couple of years as that becomes a more viable opportunity in the industry?
Are you talking about the medical application too, or the rendering destruction?
Well, it would be the rendering to go out and do the destruction. I mean, I've seen the notices of recall.
Yes.
That you got to bring it back. Then you got to open packages, and someone's got to labor intensively take it out. Then it's going to be ground up. How have you? What success have you had in looking at that market?
We're looking at, and the success rate, I admittedly, it's not been well because of the supply and demand conversation. But I believe that this is something that's extremely important for the industry, and I don't think we're going to see it change on the compliance side. Where the rendering side of it is probably the most important side of the cannabis waste management process, because that's what it allows regulators to know whether the material is being sold under the table or is being handled properly, or to avoid any kind of illicit activities or dumpster divers or whatnot. So for the rendering thing, we want to create the rendering side of it. We want to create a product that makes it super easy, so it's not labor intensive. So we can come out there and we can destruct it, but we're going to have to charge the customer for that. Customers already, the licensees already have an extremely high amount of expenses that we don't want to add to. I mean, we're by no means, we're not a cheap service. We're not a regular dumpster service, and we don't want to add to that. But I think that we will be able to successfully find a product that solves this issue, that helps the licensee break down the material in a very organic way, so that we don't declassify it as cannabis waste, so it still gets classified as cannabis waste, but at the same time saves them money and saves them time and labor. Because you're right, we've had a couple of clients too where they sent it, and as soon as it gets on our truck, the truck is almost back at the facility. We get a call at the office, hey, you need to bring that back. We got to open it back up. We got to render it. We got to record it, and then you can come pick it up. I'm like, well, we told you this, right? We have a label of instructions on the container. You got to follow this.
Right.
It's a lot of education. It's a lot of innovation that needs to come in, and we need more supply. So if we get more supply, we'll be able to sell to these manufacturers that there is a demand for this. Work with us. Let's find a solution. Let's do this.
One of the things that caught my attention in San Diego was the federal government indicted some people dumping hazardous waste, like I think it was a apartment complex, found a couple of dumpsters, and there's 50 gallons out there of post-winterization ethyl alcohol or something like that. Have you had any problems with the people that take that off of either your hands or your client's hands, and do you have any idea what's happening to that downstream?
When we collect it, it's going to a licensed facility and it's taken care of. Anything that, some clients, I want to say that they follow the guidelines to the T, but you don't know. They might be, segmenting stuff out and pushing it to a different area to save them some cost. If a client wants to avoid the high expense of hazardous, they will go through those measures, or they'll just hoard it. They'll keep it for a couple of years. And then the inspector will come in and say, well, why is it still here? And then they'll have those questions and everything. So far, we haven't had any issues. Everything that, we've collected, I want to say like maybe 5% of the time we have a little bit of a hiccup with the client that we have to take it back to them and figure it out. But for the most part, we put a lot of pressure in the beginning of the conversation to ensure that doesn't happen. As far as our side of it, as an industry as a whole, I mean, who knows? It's a total mess. So they're doing a lot of different things that you can't really track, and you can't really find out how they're doing it unless it's just a spontaneous report that someone's dumping bottles of ethanol in a dumpster.
I have a colleague over in the San Francisco Bay Area that represents the manufacturers, and they were hoarding,
Mm-hmm.
just stacking these big containers up, and he actually went in, excuse me, and got some of it and took a look at some of the lipids that are left over. When you winterize, you spin a big beaker, put alcohol in it, and you spin it, and what accumulates on the walls of those beakers are lipids. Yeah. And he looked into the downstream secondary market, and there is a market to extract those lipids for topical products. Have you seen or heard anything about that down in your neck of the woods?
I've heard. I haven't seen any on a, I would say, medium or large scale process or service for it. I have heard the similar conversations happen. It's really interesting because in cannabis there isn't just one waste stream. We specialize in certain areas and certain types, but its waste is so broad where the cannabis company will have 10, 15, 20 different types of classifications. I think it's possible. I think it's a great idea. I think anything we can do to recycle anything is awesome. You know, if it makes sense financially for both the licensee and the provider, why not?
Well, the downstream market is it's something we have to develop, but what we saw right away was the state forced you to go into packaging that was so economically unsustainable. I mean, the screams were heard immediately that you have to put it in an exit bag that takes 200, 300 years to decompose. Have you looked into the different parts of the actual waste that you're seeing to determine if any of it can be put into an ecological strain or made from products that can be recycled? Have you looked into that?
Yes, we looked to it, and 100% can be, but again, supply and demand. The volume is not there to make sense for a manufacturer or someone in that industry to repurpose the product. We've done some outreach to other packaging suppliers in the industry, and it's always been the same response. You know, it's like, well, you know, we have to make sure the product cost is low, we get enough to make sense. Other than that, you know, it doesn't make sense for us. So we try to establish those connections and establish those channels where we can collect the plastics and the glass, so that, and then get that and output it to a facility that can then repurpose it and put it back into supply chain. If we do that, we create a closed loop system. And it's really simple, you know. It's not like it's so out there that it's impossible. Those kind of processes exist. It's just, are these facilities going to want to take the risk and take the leap on maybe not making money in the first year or making small margins? If they do, great. If they don't, we come into like a standstill where we collect it, but where's it going? You know, we want to put it into a sustainable process.
Well, one of the traditional ways that, you know, you bring new products into the market is that the government will set a timeline that in 5 years you got to have X% of it under these sustainable, ecologically sustainable products. What I'd like to do is take a look at the different types and see what kind of waste we're getting there that may be part of this. Now, if you go into a cultivation site, I mean, that's one big category because they have nursery, which creates a little bit different waste because if you're seed makers, you've got this biomass that technically is still, it's got more than 0.3% THC, so it's high up there. And then you've got the stems and stalks we talked about from cultivation. But in processing, what are you seeing come out of the processing facilities if you handle any of those?
Could you specify what you mean by processing facilities? Like, are you talking about the extracts?
Well, in the cultivation arena, a processor, they take it out of the off the plant, dry it, perhaps package it. They can make some non-manufactured, you know, pre-rolls. If you know, and the problem is they're not following the rules. They're grinding it, and you know, oh, it went through the screen in the bottom. Yeah, after you ground it and manufactured it, but under the processing, they dry it, cure it. They can package it, make some pre-rolls. What kind of waste are you seeing out of those facilities?
Typically, it would be the packaging material itself, the rolling material, and it would be the processed ash or the processed flour. Usually, so far, I would say we haven't had any. We've had a few clients that fit that, I would say, category. But usually what they would do is, let's say if they're a cultivator or they're micro license that does that as well, they'll mix it in with their stems and flower waste and everything, like in that same container. So what we see specifically, we might not be able to identify to that very level, because what happens is that's going into a larger compartment from the container we provide them, and it's all getting blended in together. If it's categorized that, then it's getting decontaminated, and then it's getting taken to the proper channel of disposal. So we might not see the exact specific nature of that material on our end, because if it looks green to us, it's compostable. Putting the extract aside, but we haven't had any complications as far as that. Sometimes we would get like barrels filled with pre-rolled joints that are still in the packaging, and that's a huge problem, because that means that each joint's going to have to be eaten out, and then the rolling paper is going to have to be put on one side, and then the waste is going to be on the other side. So typically what we do is we tell the customer, like, look, you gotta handle this. We can't sit here. If you want us there, that's hours of labor that we're gonna have to put in. It's cheaper for you to do it. We'll bring it back, you take care of it, give it back to us, and we'll dispose of it.
Now, moving out from the cultivation types of facilities to either distributor or manufacturer, if it moves in bulk and they do the testing in 50-pound batches, are you seeing any standard type of boxes or say bags it's going in, anything like that, that's moving those 50-pound increments, or is it going in some other size container? What are you seeing along those lines?
It varies. Typically, whenever speaking on flour specifically, if a batch of flour gets rejected from a lab sample, we typically just get the flour. We don't get any other packaging material. It goes because we provide the container, and they would just empty it out into our container, 55-gallon drum. And we don't really see much of the packaging, because a lot of the customers that we work with don't want to dispose the packaging with us. It adds weight, which conflicts with their compliance, with their manifest, and it might add cost to them, because if it takes up more physical mass in the container, they may have to use another container. So typically, we don't really see a lot of packaging in that specific way. We see more packaging material on the retail side of it, where they'll have the jars or the plastics or the bottles, the wrappings, whatnot. But for distributors, cultivators, manufacturers, we don't really see a lot of hard, solid waste like that. We see a lot more of the organic stuff.
I've seen pictures, and some of my clients have described cardboard boxes that you put a plastic bag into that in most cases will hold up to the 50-pound batch. And one of the things that I thought about is, if it's cardboard, it can be made out of hemp. And I don't know what the amount of waste being produced that's not cannabis waste that would be cardboard boxes. I know that out in industry in general, if you're going to recycle cardboard boxes, you can get a machine that'll pack them up and wrap wires around them so you can take them in bulk and load them on a big truck and tie them down. Do you have any information on what the flow of, say, cardboard waste coming through the system up to the retailer is?
I don't have any data on it, and that's something that we're working on improving as a waste management company, is getting these kind of data. The reason I don't have data is because we're not getting the information from clients, right? We can't come in there. We're not there 8 hours a day seeing their process or anything like that. We rely on them to give us that information. So it's hard for me to tell you a one-to-one on exactly what the industry is looking at. All I can say that it's probably going to be a lot more than what we expect, only because, just like any waste industry, you don't really think about what kind of waste you have or how much, material you're really using. Like, most people don't consider that plastic bottle or that cardboard box or any unit that they're using for storage or supply or delivery. They don't consider what kind of waste that is or what can we do with that. They just throw it away. And then some people will throw it in the dumpster, some people will hoard it, some people will reuse it, some people might recycle it. So you have to get all that data from all those points and try and line them up together. So it's really hard for me to give a direct answer to that, only because the data is just so spread out and so out there.
Do you know if there's a recycling industry right now to take, say, cardboard that gets used in basically industry where they wrap it up and put it into these, the forklift can put them onto a truck and they take them away. Is that industry up and operating to your knowledge right now?
Cardboard recycling exists. All kinds of recycling exist. Specifically for cannabis, it's tough because you have to, when you get, for us, for example, as a collector or as a hauler, when we look for our end disposal sites, we have to contact them and we have to notify them that this is considered a cannabis waste. It might be contaminated with cannabis. It's coming from this industry. As soon as they hear that, 9 out of 10 times you're getting the phone hung up on you. Like, nope, we don't want it. We don't want it. It's to them, it's they don't either they don't want to deal with the potential complications, or they just don't want to, or don't believe they can recycle it. They'll be legally allowed to recycle it. So I know that they do exist. Cardboard, they can lump that in even with wood, with the pallets, glass, plastics. They all exist. It's just a question of, are they going to be open to dealing with materials that might be contaminated with cannabis? That's really where the trouble the difficulties come in.
So if we move into the retail space, either storefront or delivery, I mean, you typically handle the cannabis waste. That's got a special definition, but there's a whole lot of other waste that's coming out of the industry. We just talked about some of it. At the retail level, what specifically you're seeing that is classified as cannabis waste, and then the other types of waste that you're seeing in these facilities, even if you're not handling it, you guys go there and they see what's in their trash cans or what's being hauled away. What are you seeing at the retail level?
Retailers typically have, let's say, display flowers. They'll have their liquids from their the liquid drinks. Like if they expire, they have to dispose that. So that's both a liquid and a plastic now. They'll have the glass jars, which might have residue of cannabis, so it could fall under either glass or cannabis. Same thing with the plastics. You have edibles that could be composted, but the plastics also exist in that. That would be, you have vapes, and the vapes are probably the most difficult out of them all. So when we get a vape, or we have somebody asking about vape recycling, I should say, we have to educate and explain that there's multiple components to this. Now, if it's a single-use pen that's not removable from the battery, you can't do anything with that. You can't recycle it as a universal waste. You can't recycle it as a cannabis waste because you have two conflicting categories. The battery, lithium ion or whatever type of battery is in there, is an e-waste or a universal waste, and that has to be disposed of in a specific way. You have to categorize that. But if it has a cartridge on it, and that cartridge either has a liquid or a residue of the vape oil in it, well, that has to be disposed of as a cannabis waste material on the BCC side. So you have the state and you have the BCC now coming into conflict on one product. How do you handle that? That's a question that we try and solve. How do we handle that? It's a very big challenge, and it's something that we really want to kind of find a solution to. Now, if the battery and the vape cartridge itself is able to be separated, we can recycle the batteries as e-waste. A lot of those universal waste disposers are open to accepting those vape products because they're just a battery at that point. They already accept the tobacco vape ones, so they're like, okay, why not? But the cartridge itself, that's going to end up still going to landfill. There is no current recycling solution because there's either glass or plastic around that, and then there's the liquid inside of it, and all the plastic around it for your mouthpiece or whatnot. So how do you split up all of those into little micro pieces? That is an extremely labor-intensive job, and it's not going to happen. No waste provider is going to sit there and have assembly line of staff going one by one, picking everything apart and segmenting it all. It's going to go straight into a landfill. There's nothing you can do about that.
Are you seeing any appetite at the retail level to try and segregate out recyclables versus just straight cannabis waste at their facilities so that it can get into a stream coming from the customer back through them? Are you seeing that?
I want to say about almost all of our retail clients are interested in that. They love the idea because it's a selling point for them, right? They love the idea of being sustainable and having a solution where they can offer even to their clients, like, hey, bring your glass back or bring your whatever back and we'll recycle it for you. They love having that perk. So all of our clients are interested in handling their waste in a recycled or a sustainable way. So to answer your question simply.
Well, my friend Cody Bass has a retail shop up in Tahoe, and a couple years back he was using recyclable glass jars that he would recycle himself, and that's where the discussion started. My father worked for a beverage company that used glass bottles, and they had a facility where they brought them back in. If they weren't broken or chipped, they went into a washing machine. They came out ready to be refilled again. And so that sort of recycling of a container that's either glass or plastic that could be recycled, ground up, and re-extruded. Does that even exist at all, or is it going to have to be built as an industry here in California?
It exists, but specifically for cannabis, it's the same challenge. So let's say you get a glass jar, right, that had cannabis in it. Now that glass jar has the plastic top, which can be easily, obviously, removed, and then it has their design or the wrapping around it, the paper thin plastic on it. So you have to heat that up to get that off through either a steam process or a manual process, and then you got to wash them. You have to decontaminate it essentially so that there is no cannabis residue left in on it. And then you got to break down the glass, pelletize it, clump them all together, make it into a pellet form, and then give it to the recycler. That has to be all done before the recycler gets it, unless they do it, which then they will upsell you for that, of course, as well. Mm-hmm. But it exists. It's just, again, you got to find the provider that says, yeah, we'll take it if it comes from the cannabis industry. And if they take it, great. Now you have to enter a negotiation whether they're going to pelletize it, you're going to pelletize it, and then you have to deal with that. We would love to handle that internally, but of course that comes with cost and comes back to the conversation of supply demand. If we don't get, tons and tons and tons and literal metric tons of this material, the cost doesn't justify us to do it. We would end up going under doing that kind of recycling thing. So the obvious, easy solution is to find a end disposal site that says, yeah, just deliver it to us and then we'll take care of it. That might come in conflict with compliance because now you're handing off glass jars that have vendor information on it, or it has, or your responsibility. The people might say that, well, EcoWaste was your responsibility to do this part before recycling it. So there's those, little hoops we have to kind of jump through and figure out and open conversations about, in order to understand how we can do it exactly.
Well, I spent years in the medical industry, and I know that waste coming out of medical facilities, if that's where your partner started, that stuff's very dangerous, as we all know in this COVID problem. But the waste coming out of cannabis is not contagious. It just has an ideological fear that somehow this molecule, and it's all about THC, is going to leak out of some waste stream, and I don't know, they think kids are going to come and dig it up and want to roll it up. But what kind of challenges do you see going forward in an industry where waste has to be factored into your business plan? Because the other industries, medicine's different because you have such a specialty type, but industries that make a product, they really don't give two shits about what happens to their packaging of things when it goes down range. That's up to society to figure out how we're going to do it. But in this one, those regulations put that burden onto the industry. So going forward, how do you see the next 3 to 5 years rolling out as we really build a bigger industry here and its stream of waste? What do you think the future looks like here?
I think it looks good because for the most part, the cannabis industry is very vocal and very progressive thinking when it comes to sustainability or these new, more contemporary, modern ideas. I think that the ideal solution for these waste materials is going to be industry owners creating or being open to these ideas. So my top goal is to find, let's say, ideal goal for the plastics and the glass is to find a packaging supplier in the cannabis industry to be open to accepting this from us. So that way they can then create it and give it back to the industry. So in short, I think I'm positive about the progress that we'll make as an industry as a whole for waste management. And I think that the solution is going to be us in the industry, whether you're directly licensee or whether you're an ancillary service, it's going to come down to us to kind of open these conversations, dig into them a little more deeply, enter into like back and forth on how and testing and figuring those things out. But I think we'll get to a point where, you know, the cannabis industry will start to set more of a higher standard for renewability and sustainable kind of products.
Now, you say you're moving up into the Northern California regions. Are you up here in any locations right now?
Right now, we go up to, as we're in LA, we're LA based, and we go all the way down to San Diego. We go all the way east, and we go up to San Luis Obispo, and we're working our way up. We have some relationships in the North Cal area that are tentatively, they're not up and running yet, but they have tentatively agreed to work with us. Obviously, it makes sense for us to establish our contacts as early as possible so that we can justify getting a new location, a truck, warehouse staff, all this investment to go up into that area, because it's not just about sending a truck up from here to Sacramento. You know, that's going to be extremely expensive on both parties, but you know, we want to have another base up there so that we can service the entire other half of the state. But we have some clients up there that we've tentatively agreed to work with, and we're building that. As we continue to build that, the speed of which we come up there will increase.
My aunt's on a waste management board in Costa Mesa. She's political muckety muck there. And she tells me that they were hauling a lot of their compostable waste up into the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley. Are you seeing that still going on, or is there someplace else it's going to be composted?
I think that brings a different question, because the state, Cal Recicla, has their own set of rules that waste management or waste facilities have to follow, and they have safeguards in place so that there are no monopolies existing by the major players. So the designated location where their composters are a little bit spread out. LA and the region that we're in is a lot more compacted. Obviously, it's only because we're generally compacted here. In areas like more Eastern California, Southern California, I think that would stay like that for a while, where they'll have to transport up there, because you have to wait until more investors come in, more people want to enter composting and enter sustainability businesses and open up locations in those areas. And competition is also a big key in that. So I think that we'll probably end up seeing more, I want to say, like renewable facilities, not but other than composting, we'll see more like RNG, so renewable natural gas being developed, more anaerobic digestion, getting those kind of facilities up. I think we'll see an increase in that. Probably within next 5 years or so, we'll see more facilities like that opening up.
In Southern California, I think that by the numbers of people, they're more wide open than we are up here in Northern California. Are there any areas down there that you see don't allow it, but maybe moving towards opening up different types of businesses in the industry?
Are you specifically to waste or cannabis?
Well, without cannabis business, you don't get cannabis. I mean, you do, because there's an illegal industry out there, but we're trying to confine this to, you know, the legal one. And people ask me all the time, where are they moving to in California that they're going to be opening next? And so it's one of those questions. If they're going to be opening up, I assume that you're keeping an eye on that, because once a business opens up and starts producing cannabis waste, somebody needs to come get that. They've got to have that part of their waste management plan when they submit to the state. So are you seeing places where it's getting a little more friendly?
Absolutely. Anybody that's getting, any individual or group that's getting into recycling or sustainability now will be more open to it from the get-go. If they've already been in the street, they're set on their ways for the most part, or they're held by companies or holding companies that are set in their ways and have a set kind of definitive, like yes and no kind of ideology. But anybody that I believe, from what I've seen and from what I've heard in the conversations I've had, these people and groups that are looking to get into anaerobic digestion, for example, they're a lot very open to cannabis waste. They want it. They want it because they want to take as much as they can anyways. It makes sense for them. The more volume they have, the more energy they'll be able to produce. But I believe that we'll see a lot more friendlier response from these newer facilities.
I remember when it first got started, they were estimating 100 million pounds of cultivation waste, and I don't think we've gotten close to that yet. Now, the big issue today is coming out of this COVID hunker down, and cannabis is waving the big flag. We're an essential industry, at least at the business to customer level. Are you seeing any slowing in the supply chain because of this COVID, and how is that affecting the waste you're picking up, if at all?
Thankfully, we've been, haven't been affected very much. A few of our clients have closed their doors, and they've been retailers for the most part. The cultivators and extractors are still operating as usual. On their end, they may see, limited amount of staff because they have to control how many people are coming in and out because of COVID. Waste-wise, we haven't really seen an effect on it because they have to continue the same harvest cycles in order to ensure that their business is doing okay, so that they don't crumble. And we've been, open, and we've been ready to help if they need extra pickups, if they need something quickly on call because something came up and they just want potentially contaminated material out there. We're there for them. So thankfully, we haven't had an impact on them. I think it looks like, thankfully, a lot of our clients haven't had an impact either. I would say about 95% of our clients are still operating as usual.
Good. Okay, well, I mean, we could go on for days here about digging deep dives into this stuff. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, I mean, we have businesses up here in Northern California that we represent or we're building, and they're going to need your services. How would people get a hold of you?
They can go to our website, ecowasteservices.com. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. They can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. That's how me and Heather connected. So I try to keep up on LinkedIn. So that would be a direct plug to me, and then I would be able to take care of them from there.
Okay. Well, I know Heather's enjoyed hooking up with you. This is the first time you and I have physically met, but I certainly heard about what's going on because we were trying to figure out the waste management dilemma as soon as this went live, and I'm not sure we really have the answers. Let's just make sure that everybody understands that to put together a waste management company, you don't have some Gomer in a pickup truck. This costs money to set up these vehicles. You have to pay people, a livable wage if they're going to be out driving around. So I don't want people to get the impression that you're like the other homies will show up and do this and throw a pound in the back and we'll be good, wink and a nod. No, this is a legitimate business, and they have to plan on this. Now, I would encourage people to call you to get your costs, but I just don't want people to have the impression that getting a service like what you offered is something that is great.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's pay for, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You get what you pay for. I mean, what we do is we're building not to just be like, hey, we'll take care of it type of thing. We're building to like, hey, this is compliance, this is renewability, this is the conversations that we're having, and we're building everything based off of that. We are not the cheapest service. We are a premium service. You get a great service for a good price. And anybody can get into a truck, drive, and pick up. Sure, it's not that challenging. But when the BCC comes knocking and starts asking questions to that licensee, they're going to look to you and say, "What did you do with it? How did you do it? Where's the paperwork? Where's the trail? Where's all this information that you're supposed to be set up with, so that we don't get screwed or messed with?" That's how we look at things. We want to look at it from how do we create solutions for the licensee, not just to pick it up. It's not just about throw it in the truck and go.
Well, my mantra to my clients and anybody that listens is make sure the people that are working with you understand the supply chain and the regulations, so that if there are questions, you can give them a card and have the state call them, and you have the paperwork, the itineraries. It matches what they're saying they had waste hauled away, and you don't have the BCC coming in and sticking a microscope up your butt and looking around.
Yeah, exactly. And even if they do, that that you're taken care of, that everything is done to the T, and that you don't have to worry about that. Because if they do come with the microscope, just call us. We'll take care of it. We'll talk to them. We'll give them the details they need. Everything.
As Forrest Gump said, one less thing to worry about. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, Arm. Thank you very much for your time. And look forward to doing this again as maybe we'll get closer to some solutions to the waste besides hauling it off to a dump and burying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working towards that. So as soon as we get new information, I'll share it with you guys in the rest of the world. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome. All right. Thanks. You have a good rest of your day. Okay.
You too. Thanks.
All right.
See ya.